Aloha kakao, e como mai. Mahalo for joining this year's Capstone Symposium. My name is Adriana Brown, and I am an MSW candidate. I have a concentration in military and veterans affairs. With that being said, the topic of my research is partners of military service members, influences of help-seeking stereotypes. So a little background and on the purpose of this research. Recently, the military has recognized that the family of the military service member is the backbone of really achieving the military mission. If you're unaware, the military mission is always coming first for anything military related. If there's something going on with the soldier, it needs to be rectified in order to accomplish the mission. Again, if there's something going on with the family that's impacting the soldier negatively, that too needs to be worked on in order to accomplish the military mission. So with my research, there's actually not a lot of research that has been conducted on partners of military service members. That is why I decided to focus on this particular population. With that being said, this research study analyzes the difference in help-seeking behaviors and substance use among partners of active duty military members and the partners of reservists. So my theoretical framework, which I have right here, are behaviorism and symbolic interactionism. With behaviorism, it is expected that when a person experiences stress, that they want to cope with that stressor. It is the same thing with partners experiencing military-related stressors. These coping styles can be either healthy or maladaptive, such as using substances. A study in 2018 actually discovered that military spouses are more likely to cope with mental health concerns with food or alcohol. And I recognized in my own research that alcohol indeed is one of the substances that is mostly used among this population. Then symbolic interactionism. So with military culture, there is a stigma on seeking mental health care. And the reason behind that is because there is the stipulation that if a dependent of a military service member goes to seek assistance for their mental health, that it will go back to that service member's commander and it will reflect poorly on the soldier themselves. So there's a lot of hesitancy among this population regarding seeking mental health care. Then another study in 2017 recognized that many National Guards and reservist families reside in civilian residential areas. Because they reside in these areas, they're less likely to have that social support from other military-connected families or even have service providers who are competent in military-related concerns. Having this background and understanding of why I decided to choose this research topic, or even why I decided to go further into understanding the behavioral aspect of this, I decided to develop a quantitative quasi-experimental design to answer two questions. The first is there a difference between substance use rates and help-seeking behavior between spouses of reserve members and spouses of active duty members? And the second is there a relationship between mental help-seeking intentions and help seeker stereotype among partners of military service members? So over here, I do have my methods section. I use 3 different measurements, the first being mental help seeking intention scale, the second is the help seeker stereotype scale, and the third is tobacco, alcohol, prescription medications, and other substance tool, also known as the TAPS tool. The first 2 are based on a Likert scale, 1 to 7, 1 being highly disagree or very much disagree, and 7 being very much agree. And it's based off of different statements and words. Then the TAPS tool is more focused on the substance use rate. It's like how often do you use a certain substance in a day or a week or a month or a year, and so forth. With my data analysis, I used the independent samples t-test to analyze the overall means on the TAP scores for active duty and reserve partners, and then the one-way ANOVA to compare the means of the 4 sections of the TAPS tool among active duty and reserve partners. So right here is my descriptive statistics by branch, and I do want to acknowledge that there was a limitation in my study because I expected a small sample size, but my N equaled 386 participants. And with that, I really was expecting more Air Force, Army, and Navy participants, and I was not expecting any Marine Corps, Space Force, or Coast Guard participants. So that is why you can see that they are not divided among active duty and reserves on this side of the chart. And furthermore, with the reserves, there were only 10 participants that identified as being partners of reservist members. So with that being said, I decided that my findings would just go across the board for all branches and rather than active duty and reserves, because there really wasn't anything statistically significant to show based off of just reserves and active duty based on the sample size. With my sample size, my findings discovered that 59.8% of participants screened positive for substance use on the TAPS tool, which you can see here. So there's no use in the past 3 months, problem use, and then high risk use. If you look at high risk use, it goes from 41.5 to 54.5%, which is a very high number. And then problem use is around 20%, disregarding this outlier from the Space Force, as there were only 2 participants in that one. And I came to find out through further analysis that the reason why this number is so high is because a lot of the participants stated that they use tobacco and alcohol products on very regularly. And that is why there is such a high percentage of screening positive for substance use on the TAPS tool. Additionally, the scores on the mental help seeking intention scale and the help seeker stereotype scale among the sample suggest that there is absolutely no correlation between the thoughts of seeking help for oneself and how they view others who seek for help. And this is, again, across the different military branches. Now, the implications for this as it relates to social work is that when serving military connected families, it's very important to understand the military culture and recognize the limitations that they have, especially considering that a lot of the resources that are available are really available to only the service members themselves. It's not really available to the dependents, such as the spouses, partners, children, etc. And with that being said, whenever these individuals have to go outside of the military cluster to seek care and they go into the civilian sector, there are often a lot of practitioners who are not competent in military-related stressors or military-related concerns. So with this, social workers that are serving families impacted by the military can really benefit from the study's findings as they develop competency regarding attitudes about mental health and help seeking in these communities. Even more so, social workers have the ability to start developing programs based off of understanding that there are limitations present, and a lot of the resources that are on bases and installations aren't really meant for the dependents. So being cognizant of that and actually working toward having a better understanding of what ways to serve this particular population. Mahalo nui loa for joining me today. If you do have any questions, please let me know.